And we back again, this bitch. Well, oh shit, sorry for cursing. But anyways, now that we have the series recap all done and out of the way, it's time for the normal videos that I have not done since May, I think 18th or something, which is the last normal video I uploaded. The rest were basically podcasts. If y'all haven't checked out the series recap, I encourage you to check out episode 1. The Clippers were down bad and terrible. So my very last episode talking about the Milwaukee Bucks being NBA champions. I do not have an official playlist, but again, series recap is just, I guess semi podcast because I'm just talking through my album. Well, whatever. But yeah, as y'all can see here, I am playing as the Brooklyn Nets mainly because I'm going to be talking about them. So, if y'all didn't know, and if y'all been living under a rock, the Brooklyn Nets were literally a toe away from advancing to the conference finals and more than likely being NBA champions. Unfortunately, as great as that shot was and as great Kevin Durant has been these whole playoffs, it was not enough to carry the Brooklyn Nets and they were eliminated in the second round. However, I do think it goes beyond the injuries. Now, if y'all didn't know, I made a video a few months ago discussing the problems with the Brooklyn Nets. And in that video, I discussed two major problems with this Brooklyn Nets team. Obviously, the number one issue that I talked about in that video was injury, and obviously that came back to haunt them in the Bucks series with James Harden literally sitting out for 5 games after literally walking off the floor in game 1 with his hamstring injury, and then obviously Kyrie Irving getting hurt. But number 2, I also pointed out that their lack of defenses will also kill them. Now, shouting out my boy Pio, who is my brother from another mother, and I think he put it beautifully. Defense wins games, and I also said it wins championships as well. I mean, how else the Milwaukee Bucks won that NBA Finals? Through defense. Yep. But as great as Kyrie, James, and KD are, their defense was going to be a problem because, I know Kyrie and James can lock down when they need to, but if you're really leaning on that in the playoffs, I think you may be asking a little too much. So, I already explained those two problems in that video, but I also think it helps to point out that their lack of depth is what also killed them because they basically sacrificed a whole lot of depth to get James Harden. More notably, Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, as well as Taurean Prince. I guess y'all can say that this is a follow-up vid to the two biggest problems with the Brooklyn Nets. I do believe it is so, but I feel like this is kind of a mix of that and what I did for my What's Next for the Miami Heat video. So, let's start off with this because I know this offseason will be a great opportunity for the Brooklyn Nets, and I think they need to play their cards right if they want to see themselves holding up the Larry O'Brien trophy next year. This offseason is a great opportunity to, number one, have some depth as well as improve on the defensive end. Now, to start off, I would re-sign the following 3 players: Blake Griffin, Bruce Brown, and Jeff Green. Now, to start off, number 1, Blake Griffin. I don't want to say he necessarily balled out in the playoffs because, 12.2 off of 36% shooting and 31% from 3, and then averaging 5 rebounds and 4 assists a game. I wouldn't say it's that impressive, but y'all got to put it in this type of context. Blake Griffin fulfilled his role, and he fulfilled that role very well. He was basically a really solid two-way player. I don't think his defense was all that great, but I do think it was better than what it was when he was in LA and Detroit. His defense was really solid on Giannis, even though Giannis even still got 30. I was watching Blake Griffin, and he did the best job he could on Giannis, and he's proven to be a solid enough option. And he actually shot the 3 ball pretty solid enough in the Bucks series. So he's a very valuable asset for this Brooklyn Net team, so I would really consider re-signing him. Bruce Brown, on the other hand, I do believe he still lacks an offensive game in the NBA. Obviously, he is a really, really solid defensive player. I think he's impressed me and a lot of NBA fans because I thought he was just basically a throw-in in the Luke Kennard for Landry Shamet 3-team deal, where the Clippers got Kennard and the Nets obviously got Shamet and obviously Bruce Brown that deal. I just thought it was a trade that nobody really cared about, but I thought low-key the Nets got a gem in Bruce Brown, and he absolutely proved that this entire season, being the same type of defender, let's say Alex Caruso and Patrick Beverley and PJ Tucker and Terrence Mann. He's basically on those tier. Actually, let me backtrack. I don't think he's on those tier of defenders, but I do believe he is comparable to an Alex Caruso. So the Nets did a good job with this one, and I do think he's worth keeping. Now, I get it that there are some teams that want him because they need a defensive-minded stud like Bruce Brown on their team. But if I'm the Nets, I should be willing to retain him because he is a solid and sound defensive player who, man, he just works hard, man. And obviously, Jeff Green being the solid veteran he is, I think he loves playing with Kyrie, James, and KD. He's obviously played with KD before in Oklahoma City, so re-signing Jeff Green would be a great idea. He's still a solid defender at 35 years old. He's a solid enough three-point shooter, as he proved in his 27-point performance in Game 5 of the Bucks series, as well as his half season in Houston. I think y'all get the gist. I don't really need to explain much about Jeff Green and how he fulfilled this role, or his role, this year with the Brooklyn Nets. So now that they did their job, and I'm speaking as if they actually did this, which I have a feeling that they will do, but say they do this, now to farm in the free agent market. So what do y'all want to do if you're the Brooklyn Nets? Obviously, you want to improve your depth after losing a whole lot of that with the James Harden trade. So defensively, I would sign guys like Avery Bradley and Javel Mcgee. Avery Bradley would be a nice fit off the bench to pair with Bruce Brown, so that way when you need defensive outlets, you can go with those two down the stretch. If you need to swap Kyrie and James for Avery and Bruce, I think they would complement each other really well on switches and all that. Avery's a very pesky defender, and I already explained my piece on Bruce Brown. He did have a down year with the Heat and the Rockets, but that was mostly because of, I think, he was involved in health and safety protocols, and then he was injured for most of the season. And I do think, when healthy, he is a very solid piece to have on this Brooklyn Nets team. Javel Mcgee, on the other hand, does also address some of the issues that the Brooklyn Nets have, and the Bucks exposed them pretty well, even after the injuries. But which was, number one, their interior defense was getting shredded. I think Javel will play a key piece. He may not switch all that well, play switches all that well, but he is a very solid interior defender, and I think that's what the Brooklyn Nets need. And he's a very solid rebounder, which is also what the Brooklyn Nets need. So Javel will be another great piece to add to this team. And not only that, he's played with Kevin Durant before in Golden State, so obviously that's instant chemistry between the two. Also, he is part of that 2020 Lakers championship team with Avery Bradley, so again, instant chemistry right there. And I don't know how they're going to get this one done. It could be possible, but I would try to get Danny Green via sign and trade using Joe Harris's contract, meaning Joe Harris through this deal would be sent to the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I don't know how they're going to do that because Joe Harris is on a pretty big contract, so it could consider him unmovable. But I do believe that if they're able to pull this off, I think they should absolutely go for it if the opportunity presents itself. But the reason why I want to throw Joe Harris in this fantasy trade package, I guess y'all can say it, it's not because I think Joe Harris sucks like a lot of these people, a lot of these casuals think he is. I don't think Joe Harris is bad. I just think him missing shots was the symptom of a bigger problem with this Brooklyn Nets team, which is if they were not hitting their shots, their lack of defense could not make up for that. While there was some really good defensive plays in the Bucks series with Blake Griffin getting timely blocks, Kevin Durant getting some blocks and all that, I don't think it was enough. And I think Joe Harris missing shots was a symptom that he was not making them any worse, but he was not making them any better because his defense is kind of like he's a below average defender. So I would trade him for a much better defender. Obviously, you're not going to get the consistent three-point shooting you got with Joe Harris, but you obviously get a guy who can make up for his lack of three-point shooting with his defense. That's how, Danny Green was able to be part of our championship team. because even though he missed that top of the key wide open shot in that game 5 in the Mamba jerseys, he was still a reliable defensive weapon against Jimmy Butler, and also he was a reliable defensive weapon against guys like Jamal Murray, James Harden, and Damian Lillard. So if y'all can do that, I would consider trading for Danny Green. Like, I know he's a free agent, but I would sign and trade Joe Harris's contract for man, y'all know what I'm trying to say. Get Danny Green via sign and trade using Joe Harris's contract. That way, you may not get 2013 Finals Danny Green. Hell, you may not even get the shooter Joe Harris is, but you still get a solid enough three-point shooter. And even if he's not hitting his shots, then that's all right, because he can make up for it with his presence on the defensive end. Now, in terms of a backup distributor or a backup playmaker or a backup scorer, I'm going to be honest with y'all, man. Mike James ain't it. Mike James just simply ain't it, bruh. Like, come on. I don't need to explain how trash he was in the Bucks series, simply because he really wasn't doing much when Kyrie was down, and there was a reason why Steve Nash DMP'd him. So what would I do if I were the Brooklyn Nets? Well, I would consider signing a guy like Lou Williams. Lou Will obviously had a down year with both the Clippers and the Hawks. I don't know if it was because of a diminished role, or something was up with him mentally, or something was not right with him. I don't know. He just did not have all that great of a year in comparison to the last 3 seasons, where he averaged 20 a game, and 2 of those seasons he won 6th Man of the Year. But we saw in these playoffs, more specifically Game 5 of the Philly series and Games 4 and 5 of the Bucks series, where he is a very solid scorer, and he proved to be that in the 2 games that Trae Young was out. So a guy like Lou Williams would be very beneficial to this Nets team, especially if you put it in this context. If Kyrie and James get hurt again, Lou Will can obviously, he's not the scorer that Kyrie and James are, but he is a very, very reliable one, and he'll get you some much needed points off the bench, and he'll obviously take pressure off of Kyrie, James, and KD. Now, again, that's dependent on the role he's given, because obviously Blake Griffin, you could argue he's their 6th man as well, but I do think Lou would help out this team a lot. And let's say it was Lou Will instead of Mike James in that game 4, I think it would have been much better for the Nets, because, you know, at the end of the day, they do rely on offense. So why not get another offensive scorer that can pair well with Kevin Durant, and that could cover some ground that Kyrie and James left when they went down. And that's really it for what the Brooklyn Nets need to do this offseason. Obviously, Kyrie, Harden, and KD, as long as the 3 mesh together, I think they will do just fine. Outside of Lua being your only other offensive player, and I guess Blake Griffin counts too because he can still do some stuff on offense, you just really need to pair this team with some really good defensive-minded players like Javel Mcgee and Avery Bradley, as I mentioned. Re-signing Bruce Brown and Jeff Green will help out a lot. And if they're able to do this somehow, some way, you can sign and trade Danny Green using Joe Harris's contract. I don't think that one's going to happen. But I do believe that they will re-sign Bruce Brown, Blake Griffin, and Jeff Green. And I do believe they will sign at least one of these guys or 2 of these guys at max, between Avery Bradley, Lou Will, and JaVale. I'm confident enough that they'll sign those guys. So let's say if all the stuff in this video happened, which, again, if my Miami Heat video didn't age very, very well because I said they should trade for Jrue Holiday, and obviously that did not happen. If that did not age well, I don't think this video will age well, but let's say it does. This would be their lineup going into the 2021-22 season. Again, these are just hypotheticals. So if these hypotheticals were to happen, their starting lineup would be Kyrie, James Harden, Danny Green, KD, Javel Mcgee, and off the bench, you have Lou Williams, Avery Bradley, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, and Blake Griffin. And obviously your reserves would be Nick Claxton and DeAndre Jordan. By the way, I may run a 2K simulation with this Brooklyn Nets team using all the guys that I mentioned in this video, so be on the lookout for that. Again, I'm not certain that all this is going to happen. In fact, I would be surprised if, you know, at least most of these deals actually happen, because Apparently, my video just foretold the future. But not only that, I don't know that much of Brooklyn's cap space, but I do know that they need to clear some of it if they want to sign some decent free agents this year. And I would consider signing these guys if I were the Brooklyn Nets. And even if they don't, again, this offseason is a great opportunity to not only improve your depth, but also improve defensively as well, because you don't want to have those same problems coming into the 2021-22 season. So that is my overall point making this video. So yeah, that is basically my take on what the Brooklyn Nets should do this offseason. This was a pretty long video than I anticipated. It's almost like the series recap videos, where most of them, I think I average like 25 minutes per episode, which that's a whole long, that's so long of me just rambling about basketball and how I think I have so much knowledge when really I don't. Nah, just kidding, I do. Otherwise I wouldn't be making YouTube, but not to the level of guys like Rusty and Kenny. Why am I rambling at this point? But yeah, that's my video on the Brooklyn Nets. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Brooklyn, please somehow make these signings happen, because I actually want this video to age well, because my track record suggests that none of my offseason predictions age well outside the Avery Bradley going to Miami deal and all that. But yeah, I'm just basically done talking. Y'all get the point. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. I'm X. Deuces.